Hello students, I am going to discuss the physics paper from the NEET mock test. Okay, let's start the discussion. Question number 1. As shown in figure, two equal masses each of 4 kg are suspended from a spring balance. The reading of the spring balance will be. So, this is the diagram they have provided. We have to find out the reading in spring balance. The system is in equilibrium. The spring balance reading all the time will be the tension in the spring. So, how you can calculate the tension in the spring? The reading of the spring balance is nothing but the tension. How you can calculate this tension? Since this system is in equilibrium, throughout this string and spring, one single tension is acting. For finding out this tensional value, you can look at the free body diagram of 4 kg. So you can check in 4 kg there are two forces. One is 4G because of gravity, and away from the body tension is acting. So the body is at equilibrium. T and 4G is balancing. So the tension is nothing but 40 Newton, or in kilogram the tension will be 4 kilogram. So the same value you are getting as the reading. Hence, the correct option is option C is the correct answer. Okay, let's discuss question number 2. The equation of stationary wave along a stretched string is given by y is equal to 5 sine pi x by 3 cos 40 pi t. So this is the equation of a wave in stretched string. Obviously, this is the equation of standing wave. What they are demanding, when x and y are in centimeter and t is in second, the separation between two adjacent antinodes. You know very well, in a stretched string, when standing waves or stationary waves are formed, the fixed points without any kind of displacement, you can call it as node. And the maximum displacement position is known as antinode. The distance between two nodes is nothing but lambda by 2. And the distance between node and antinode will be lambda by 4. But in our question they are asking the distance between two consecutive or two adjacent antinodes. So two adjacent antinodes also has the same distance of lambda by 2. So the answer will be lambda by 2. Now you have to calculate the value of lambda by 2 numerically from the data given. Okay. So what is this term? The standard equation is nothing but y is equal to 2a sine of kx cos omega t. This k is propagation constant. So the coefficient of x will be k. Here the coefficient of x is nothing but pi by 3. So the k value is pi by 3, and propagation constant you can write it as 2 pi by lambda, which is nothing but pi by 3. By solving you are getting the lambda as 6 centimeter. But the distance between antinode is our question. So what will be the value of lambda by 2? Lambda by 2 will be nothing but 3 centimeter. So our correct answer is 3 centimeter, which is option C is the correct answer. Next, question number 3. A proton and an alpha particle enter a uniform magnetic field perpendicularly with the same speed. If proton takes 25 microseconds to make 5 revolutions, then the periodic time for the alpha particle would be. So the proton's data is given for 5 revolutions. For 5 revolutions, it is taking how much second? 25 microsecond. Okay, so for one revolution, what will be the time requirement? For one revolution, 25 by 5, 5 microsecond is the time of revolution. So what is the time taken for one revolution? It is nothing but the time period. So time period of proton's revolution is 5 microsecond. Now you must know a very essential data. What is that? When a charged particle is entering in a magnetic field, uniform magnetic field, what is the equation of time period? The time period will be nothing but 2 pi m by d cube. Okay, so by analyzing this data, how we can calculate the ratio of time period of proton as well as alpha particle. So you can see both charged particles are entering in the same magnetic field, so we not bother about B. 2 pi is also constant. So time period is proportional to mass by charge ratio. For proton and alpha particle, we are going to analyze. For proton, mass is what? Mass is, if you are taking 1 AMU and charges 1 unit, corresponding value for alpha particle is the mass will be 4 AMU and the charge will be 2 unit. So the ratio is 1:2. So the time period ratio of proton and alpha particle when it is entering into a uniform magnetic field is nothing but 1:2. If proton is taking 5 microsecond, 2 times of proton's time will be taken by alpha particle. So the time period of alpha particle is 2 times of 5 microsecond, nothing but 10 microsecond will be the answer. So the correct option is option C is the correct answer. Let's discuss question number 4. In the following circuit, the equivalent resistance between A and B. The circuit is given here. The circuit is connected with the 2 diodes, 2 PN junctions. You can see here. So the value of this resistance is 12 ohm. So first of all, they are asking what is the effective resistance between the terminal A and B. By analyzing the terminal potential, A is more negative. So this point is more negative comparative to the N side. Hence, this diode is in reverse biased condition. Similarly, this diode also, this is less negative portion. This portion is getting more negative potential. This is also in reverse biased mode. In reverse biased mode, an ideal diode doesn't conduct any kind of electricity. So you can eliminate this path while calculating the effective resistance. So the current will prefer the path like this. Okay, so the total circuit resistance you can calculate in this mode, that is 8 plus 6 plus 6. 8 plus 6 plus 6. Answer is 20 ohm. Hence, effective resistance between terminal A and B is 20 ohm. Option C is the correct answer. Question number 5. The half-life period of a radioactive element X is same as the mean lifetime of another radioactive element Y. Initially, they have the same number of atoms. Then you have to select the correct option from given. So what we can do, we have to know the idea of 2 data. One is half-life period. For a radioactive element, the half-life period is ln 2 divided by decay constant. This ln 2 is nothing but 0.693 divided by decay constant. Similarly, the mean life is defined as inverse of decay constant. These are the 2 equations you must know to solve this particular question. In this question, they have given the half-life of one element is matching with the mean life of another element. Let's say first element is X and the second element is Y. So half-life of X can be written as 0.693 divided by lambda X is equal to mean life of another radioactive nuclei Y. I can written it as 1 by lambda Y. By checking, you can see lambda X by lambda Y is 0.693, which is less than 1. Okay, so lambda X will be less than lambda Y. If lambda X is less than lambda Y, what is the conclusion we can see? We know the disintegration equation. the decay equation or disintegration equation for radioactive nuclei is dN by dt, a rate of disintegration can be written as minus lambda times n, and n is the number of radioactive nuclei present. They given the number of nuclei present for both the elements x as well as y is same. So this is constant for both the elements. So the rate of decay is proportional to lambda. So which have more lambda? Y has more decay constant. So which will disintegrate fast? Y will disintegrate fast. So the rate of decay of Y will be more than X. Which option says this is answer? Option C. Here also option C is the answer. Y will decay faster than X. Next question, question number 6. An insulated container containing n moles of monoatomic gas of molar mass m is moving with a velocity v0. If the container is suddenly stopped, find the change in temperature. So here in question number 6, they have given a container is moving with certain kinetic energy. What will be the value of, what will be the magnitude of kinetic energy? It is nothing but half of total mass of the gas inside the container. There are n moles and molar mass is m. So n into m will be the total mass of the gas in container. So half m V0 square. This is the kinetic energy of the gas in the container. Let's say this is equation number 1. When this container suddenly stops, the whole of this kinetic energy will be transformed as the potential energy. The kinetic energy is transformed as potential energy. When the container suddenly stops, the whole of this kinetic energy will be transferred as the internal energy of the gas. So you can write the kinetic energy is changing as the internal energy. Change in internal energy. And one more thing you know very well, the change in internal energy can be find out using what equation? What is the equation we are using there? We can use half of F into N into R delta T. So this is the equation of change in internal energy, where F is the degree of freedom, N is the number of moles, and R is universal gas constant. Obviously delta T is change in temperature. So if you are able to substitute the data here, what you are getting? Substitute equation number 1 here. So half of N m V0 square is equal to half of. Here they are using monoatomic gas. For monoatomic gas, the degree of freedom is 3. So degree of freedom I am substituting as 3. N is the number of moles. R into delta T. N and N can be cancelled. 2 and 2 can be cancelled. And finally, the change in temperature. That is the question they are asking. The change in temperature delta T will be nothing but m V0 square divided by 3R. So this is the required answer. So the correct option is option A. Okay, let's go with question number 8. A luminous object is placed at a distance of 30 cm from the convex lens of focal length 20 cm. On the other side of the lens, at what distance from the lens, a convex mirror of radius of curvature 10 cm be placed in order to have an inverted image of the object coinciding with image formed by lens. So in this given question, a convex lens is there and we are placing an illuminated object at a distance of 30 centimeter. So this is the object distance, and focal length of this focal length of this convex lens is given as 20 centimeter. From this lens position, we placed a convex mirror in such a way that after reflection, a final image is coinciding with the object's position. So let's try to draw the ray diagram. one of the rays coming and hitting on the lens, and after refraction, it will travel like this. You know, after reflection, the light ray retraces the path and coinciding here, hence we are getting the image. And obviously, one light ray is passing through the pole of the lens and hitting at the pole of the mirror, and it will reflect back. Okay, so for reflecting back perfectly from any mirror, what is the condition? The angle of incidence must be 0, or the angle of incidence must be in a perpendicular way. Okay, so the light ray is incident on the surface perpendicular. Then only the light ray is able to trace back the exact path and coinciding here and forming the image. Since this is a real image, because it is forming by getting the true coincidence of two reflected rays, okay, so the image will be real. So what will be the idea we are getting from this diagram? You know very well, for a spherical curve, okay, the perpendicular length on this thing will be radial distance. This line, radius is always perpendicular to the surface. Since this line is perpendicular to the surface means exactly at the point of incidence, it is perpendicular to the tangent drawn here. So it is perpendicular means this distance must be a radial distance or radius, and this will be the center of this mirror. In question they have given the radius of the spherical mirror as 10 centimeter. The radius of curvature as 10 centimeters. So this distance, that is nothing but the radius, which is 10 centimeter. So obviously this distance is also 10 centimeter. And one more thing, what will be this point O? This point O is the image location of this lens if we are not placing this mirror. If that mirror, convex mirror, is not at this position, definitely a real image has to be formed at point O. So how we can find out the distance of this image or location of the image from this lens? That is nothing but this V. So since you know the value of u as well as the focal length, for this lens you can find out the value of v easily, isn't it? What is the equation we are using? We can use the lens equation. 1 by f is equal to 1 by v minus 1 by u, and we want to find out the value of v. 1 by v is 1 by f plus 1 by u. Focal length for convex lens is positive, so it is 20 centimeter plus, and the u, the object distance is negative, which is nothing but minus 30, so you are getting minus 30 plus 20 divided by minus 600, so this is minus 10 by minus 600, so answer for V will be 60 centimeter. So the final image, the image because of the lens is forming at a distance of 60 centimeter from the lens. Okay, so this distance is 60 centimeter. And one more thing, from the pole of the mirror, the distance till O is 10 centimeter. In our question, they are asking what is the distance between mirror and lens. So the distance between mirror and lens will be 60 minus 10. It is 50 centimeter, which is the required answer. So the correct option is option C is the correct answer. Okay, let's discuss question number 9. A coil of resistance 400 ohm is placed in a magnetic field. So the resistance of the coil is given as 400 ohm. If the magnetic flux linked with the coil varies with the time, as the equation of flux, the variation of flux as a function of time is given as 50 t squared plus 4. Then they are asking what is the induced current in the coil at t is equal to 2 seconds. They're asking about the induced current at t is equal to 2 seconds. How you can find out this data? Definitely this is from the chapter electromagnetic induction. In electromagnetic induction, the first and foremost thing we have studied the Faraday's electromagnetic induction law. The law says the induced EMF because of flux change. I am only writing the magnitude of induced EMF is rate of change of flux linked with the coil. So what will be the magnitude of induced EMF from this given data? Differentiate this function phi, the flux value, with respect to time. You are getting 100 t, especially at t is equal to 2 seconds. They are asking the question. So at t is equal to 2 seconds, what is the induced EMF? What is the magnitude of induced EMF? It is nothing but 100 into 2, which is 200 volt. Now they are asking what is the value of induced current. If you know the induced EMF, the induced current is very easy. Ohm's law. You just apply Ohm's law. So induced current will be induced EMF divided by resistance. So answer is 200 divided by the resistance is 400 as given. So the answer is half. That is 0.5 ampere. So from the given option, option A is the correct answer. An electromagnetic wave of frequency 3 MHz passes from vacuum into a dielectric medium with permittivity 4, and that is relative permittivity they given, relative permittivity 4 and relative permeability 1. Then you have to select which is the correct option. They are asking about the change in wavelength and frequency. So because of the medium change, that is first medium is vacuum and next medium is a dielectric medium, how you can observe the frequency change as well as the wavelength change or velocity change, how you can analyze easily. Since it is an electromagnetic wave, we have studied already these things in optics. Optics, we are dealing with light. Light is nothing but an electromagnetic wave. So the term which is helping for easy analysis is refractive index. A refractive index for the pair of media. Since first medium is vacuum, the refractive index for this pair of media is the absolute refractive index itself. So what will happen? How you can find out the absolute refractive index N in terms of relative permittivity and relative permeability. The relation between these three things are very important. Let's solve it. We know N, the refractive index, absolute refractive index is velocity of light or velocity of light in vacuum, that is nothing but c, divided by velocity of light in this dielectric medium. Here the light speed is c and here the light speed is v. So c by v will be the ratio of c by v will be the refractive index. Okay, let's say this is equation number 1. But we already studied in electromagnetic waves one important equation, c is equal to 1 by root of mu naught epsilon naught. This is the consequence of Maxwell's relation, Maxwell's equations. Similarly, for other medium, v will be 1 by root of mu into epsilon. This is permeability of that medium as well as permittivity of that medium. If I am substituting these two data in equation number 1, I am getting the refractive index of the given medium N will be C is 1 by root of mu naught epsilon naught and V is 1 by root of mu epsilon. So I can write after division, it will be like this. So you are getting square root of mu by mu naught and epsilon by epsilon naught. Mu by mu naught, what is permeability in any medium divided by the permeability of absolute value of permeability or permeability in vacuum. This is known as relative permeability and this is known as relative permittivity. So a wonderful relation. Do remember this equation. You are getting the refractive index, the absolute refractive index of the given medium is square root of relative permeability into relative permittivity. Very important. Okay, so in given question, what the data they provided? They provided the relative permittivity is 4 and relative permeability is 1. So in question number 10, the refractive index of the medium you can calculate it as 4 into 1, which is nothing but 2. Okay, so if the refractive index is 2, what will be our answer? If the refractive index 2, from equation number 1, you can say 2 is c by v, or velocity of the wave in that particular medium will be c by 2, half of the velocity in vacuum. If velocity is c by 2, what will be the wavelength? For any electromagnetic wave, what is the relation connecting velocity, frequency and wavelength? The equation is V is equal to F lambda. The equation is V is equal to F lambda. Here, the frequency will be a constant. Do remember, when a wave is traveling from one medium to another medium, frequency will not change. Frequency is a source dependent property. So, frequency is a constant. In that scenario, if velocity becomes half of light velocity, okay, if velocity becomes half, it becomes c by 2, what will happen? The lambda also becomes half. The wavelength also becomes half. Okay, so what is the correct option? The wavelength is half and the frequency remains unchanged. Hence, option 4 is the correct answer. Question number 11. In Young's double slit experiment, one of the slit is wider than the other, so that the amplitude of the light from one slit is double that from the other slit. If Im be the maximum intensity, the resultant intensity when they interfere at phase difference phi. Out of the given option, you have to find out which one is correct. So in question number 11, they are saying, this question is actually related with Young's double slit experiment. Because of the width difference, the amplitude of the light waves coming from these things, these two slits are different. Suppose one of the amplitude is A, the second amplitude you can consider as 2A. If these two light waves are interfering at a point on screen with phase difference phi, what will be the resultant amplitude? So actually this question you can do with the help of phasor addition. If one of the amplitude is 2A and other amplitude is A and the phase difference between them is phi, what will be the resultant amplitude? How you can find out the value of resultant amplitude? So the phasor addition we have done in format of vector addition formula. So AR square is 2A the whole square plus A square plus 2 into first one into second one, 2A into A and into cos of angle between these two vectors, these two phases, that is cos phi. So AR square, the resultant amplitude square, you are getting 4A square plus A square, 5A square plus 4A square cos phi. You can take the A square term out, 5 plus 4 cos phi. So this is the equation which is giving the resultant amplitude square. Now they are asking the question in terms of, they are asking the answer in terms of intensity. How we can connect amplitude and intensity? You know very well, the intensity of light wave is proportional to square of the amplitude. By using this idea, I can write the AR square as IR because resultant amplitude square is proportional to resultant intensity. Here also the same proportionality constant will come on LHS and RHS, they will cancel, and A square can be written as I square. A square is representing the intensity, proportional to the intensity from one slit. For example, here the amplitude is A, the square of this amplitude is proportional to the intensity of light wave from this slit. That's why I'm writing this as I into 5 plus 4 cos phi. Okay, now they are giving the maximum intensity of the resultant format. The resultant interference is giving maximum intensity as IM. By analyzing this equation, equation number 2, what is the maximum intensity? The resultant intensity is maximum when this angle is maximum. This value is maximum. So cos phi is maximum for phi is 0. So this answer cos phi will become 1 and it becomes 5 plus 4. It will be 9i. Let's say this is equation number 3. So I am writing the answer in terms of maximum intensity. Okay. Equation number 2 is giving the resultant intensity will be I into, we have to write the answer in terms of maximum intensity. So from equation number 3, I am writing I as I max by 9 into 5 plus 4 cos phi. So this will be the required answer. But if you are analyzing the options, the answers are in half angle format. Here it is 5, but the answer format is in 5 by 2. How you can convert this 5 to 5 by 2? You can use the half angle formula. IR is equal to IM by 9 into 5 plus 4 into cos phi can be written as 2 cos square phi by 2 minus 1. If you are expanding this thing, finally you will get IM by 9 into 5 plus 8 cos square phi by 2 minus 4, which is nothing but 5 minus 4 is 1. So final answer will be IM by 9 into 1 plus 8 cos square phi by 2. So the correct option is option C. Question number 12. If H is Planck's constant and E is the charge, the dimensions of resistance are. So in terms of H and E, question number 12, in terms of H and E, they are asking the dimensions of resistance. You know the resistance can be written as voltage divided by current, V by I, volt by current. Volt you can write by using the formula work upon unit charge divided by current can be written as rate of charge, isn't it? Rate of charge flow, Q by T, and T can be right on numerator. So you are getting W divided by Q square into T. Now how we can proceed further? In this equation, the charge term is there. Now you have to insert the term of Planck's constant. So for inserting Planck's constant term, what I can do? You can see there is a term of work here. Work is equivalent to energy. So I can write instead of work, energy divided by Q square into T, and energy in terms of H for the light. For the photon concept, we know E is equal to H nu. So instead of E, I can write H nu into what? T divided by Q square. So this is a format you can equate for resistance, and dimension wise, you can see the dimension of R is matching with which term? So H, frequency and time, dimension of H, dimension of frequency, dimension of time. Frequency and time are inverse, yes or no? So the dimension of this one is T power minus 1, the dimension of time is T, they will cancel each other, and Q square, it is a charge square. In terms of E, you can write it as E square. So ultimately, the dimension of resistance is H by E square. Option C is the correct answer. Question number 13. What is the minimum energy required to launch a satellite of mass m from the surface of a planet of mass capital M and radius r in a circular orbit at an altitude of 2r? In question number 13, from a planet of mass m and radius r, you are launching a satellite of mass small m. Okay, so you have to launch this satellite in an orbit. The orbit has an altitude. Altitude, remember, you have to measure all the time. You have to measure it from surface. You shouldn't measure it from the center of Earth. So altitude is 2r. The height is 2r. The point you have to remember, when you are launching a satellite, the satellite must orbit. It's starting orbiting. That means it is having certain kinetic energy. It is moving with certain orbital velocity. Because of that, it will have certain kinetic energy. Okay, so when you are giving a minimum energy for this satellite, what are the energy the satellite have now? The satellite will have kinetic energy as well as potential energy. Okay, at this particular orbit also, the satellite will have kinetic energy as well as potential energy. You can call this energy as initial energies and these as final energies. Fine. So when you are launching, the launching is happening throughout a gravitational field, and the gravitational field is a conservative field. So for a conservative field, the mechanical energy is always conserved. You can solve this problem very easily using the idea of conservation of mechanical energy. According to conservation of mechanical energy, initial kinetic energy plus initial potential energy, that is the total initial mechanical energy, is equal to final kinetic energy plus final potential energy, the total final mechanical energy. Okay, so how we can proceed? What is the initial kinetic energy? That is the term we have to find out. Plus initial potential energy. On gravitational scenario, the potential energy is negative and the equation is minus of g, planet's mass, mass of the object divided by the distance from the center. So at this location, the distance from the center is radius itself, which is equal to final kinetic energy. How you can find out the final kinetic energy here? Okay, that term I will write. Before that, I am writing the final potential energy. How you can write the final potential energy at this location? The final potential energy is minus gmm divided by the total distance from the center, that is nothing but 3r. Why I am preferring to write the final potential energy first? Why? Because for this kind of a revolution system, in a conservative field, there is a common pattern you have to remember. This is not only true for the gravitational field, it is true for the electrostatic field. The same thing you have already going to be, already you are dealt in which chapter? The chapter called atoms. So there also the same kind of thing. When around the nucleus an electron is revolving, the same kind of things you can see. So the idea is you can write the ratio of total energy to kinetic energy to potential energy. Okay. So total energy is to kinetic energy is to potential energy. What will be this ratio? The kinetic energy and potential energy, I am only writing the magnitude ratio. Okay. Why? Because total energy and potential energy is negative, kinetic energy is positive. But the magnitude wise, kinetic energy as well as total energy are same. But potential energy is twice of that. This is very important relation. You have to remember this. Is it okay? So you can use this idea here. If you know the potential energy at this location, you can easily say at this particular orbit, the kinetic energy will be half of this potential energy and it is positive. Do remember it is positive. So GMM divided by half of this magnitude is 6R. And after solving this equation, you will get the initial kinetic energy value. Initial kinetic energy will be, you can take this term here, GMM, you can take it as common, and 1 by 6, you can take R also common. 1 by 6 minus 1 by 3 plus this 1. GMM divided by R. So just use the idea of LCM. So multiply here with 6 and divide with 6. You are getting 1 minus 2 plus 6 by 6. 1 minus 2 minus 1, 6 minus 1, 5, 5 by 6, GMM divided by R. So this is the final answer. So for launching of this satellite, what is the minimum kinetic energy you have to apply here? The answer will be 5 by 6 GMM by R. Hence, the correct option is option A. 1 gram of ice is mixed with 1 gram of steam. After thermal equilibrium, the temperature of the mixture is. Okay. For 14th question, they are asking 1 gram of ice. Since the temperature is not specified for the ice, you can take it as 0 degrees Celsius ice, and it is mixing with 1 gram of steam, and steam at 100 degrees Celsius, you can assume. And for doing these kinds of questions, you should know certain basic data. First one is the latent heat of vaporization or condensation of water or steam is 540 calorie per gram per degree Celsius. Similarly, specific heat of water, that is the amount of heat energy required for raising the temperature by 1 unit, 1 degree Celsius, is 1 calorie per gram per degree Celsius. So if you are mixing these two things, what will be the final temperature of the mixture at thermal equilibrium? So for solving this question, you have to assume a very basic level of temperature. So first of all, I am taking 1 gram of ice is converting to 1 gram of water. And here the temperature is 0 degree. Then just convert this 1 gram of water to 1 gram of water of 100 degrees Celsius. So I am assuming, let this be the temperature, reference temperature. We will work on with this temperature first. So this is the temperature for 1 gram of water. So what will happen? For converting 1 gram of ice to 1 gram of water, this is a fusion process we required for the fusion. So latent heat of fusion also, you must know, it is 80 calorie per gram per degree Celsius. So for this fusion process, 80 calorie heat required. 1 gram of water is converting to 1 gram of water of 100 degrees Celsius, 0 degrees Celsius to 100 degrees Celsius. For 1 degree rise in temperature, 1 calorie is required for 1 gram. Here the change in temperature is 100 degrees Celsius. So the temperature, the amount of heat required is 100 times of 1 calorie, that is 100 calorie. Is it clear? So the total requirement for this entire conversion is 80 plus 100, that is nothing but 180 calorie. So this is the demand. That means for the fusion of 1 gram of ice to 1 gram of water of temperature 100 degrees Celsius, the total demand of heat is 180 calorie. Let's say this demand is sufficiently supplied by the conversion of steam. 1 gram steam, when it is converting, the steam at 100 degrees Celsius, when it is converting 1 gram steam, 1 gram of water, 1 gram of steam is condensing and forming 1 gram of water at 100 degrees Celsius. The amount of heat it is released is nothing but 540. So for this conversion, you can see the amount of heat which is just released by the steam is 540 calorie, which is more than enough for this conversion. Nearly this is 3 times of heat is there. So for making the whole change, the whole steam is not utilized. Why? The whole steam conversion is giving 540 calorie. Only we required 1/3 amount. So 1/3 of the steam is only converting to 1 gram of water of 100 degrees Celsius. Is it clear? So what is the final thing? 1/3 of the steam will convert to 1 gram, convert into 1/3 of steam, that is 1/3 gram, is converting to water, 1/3 gram of water at 100 degrees Celsius. Is it clear? So finally, what is the mixture? The mixture is the already existing water of 100 degrees Celsius plus the converted water of 1/3. So totally 1 plus 1/3. Yes or no? 4/3 gram of water. And that water is also at 100 degrees Celsius. Then the steam is also, the remaining steam is also, that is 2/3 gram of steam is actually at 100 degrees Celsius. So the final temperature of the whole mixture is 100 degrees Celsius. So all the time when this kind of a problem is coming, you have to take a reference temperature. Most of the cases it will be 100, sometimes it can be 0. Okay, so you have to work from there. If the steam is the whole steam is not able to utilize, then you have to adjust the values according to that. Is it fine? Question number 15. A heavy uniform chain lies on a horizontal tabletop. If the coefficient of friction between the chain and the table surface is 0.25, then the maximum fraction of length of the chain that can hang over one edge of the table. So in question number 15, a chain is hanging from a tabletop. The coefficient of friction at this tabletop is 0.25. So how much fraction is hanging? The question demands how much fraction is hanging. So for doing this question, let's say out of the total length, X part of the chain is on the table surface and Y part is hanging. Since the chain is of uniform length, uniform chain, you can say the mass density, linear mass density of this chain, you just assume it as lambda. So what will be the total mass of this much part? This much part has a mass of lambda is the mass density into the length is how much? The length is, yes. So what is the mass of this total part? The mass of this total part is, since y part is hanging here, the mass I can write y into linear mass density lambda. So what is the force acting on this much part? The force acting is nothing but m into g, and mass of this much part is lambda times of y into g. So this is the dragging force. And because of the dragging force, a force is acting here. Clear? Because of that, this upper part has a moving tendency in forward direction, but this upper part of the chain is not moving forward. Why? Because the frictional force is opposing this movement. So this y lambda force, y lambda is the mass into g. This force is balanced by the frictional force. So the frictional force is nothing but the topmost part is x part. So x into this much length is, I am taking it as x. And the linear mass density is lambda. So what I can write, x into lambda. Okay, this is the total mass on the chain's part which is lying on the top of the table. So m is the mass. So what is the equation? Actually the equation of frictional force. Sorry, here you have to write the frictional force, F. So y lambda g. What is the value of frictional force? Frictional force is mu into normal reaction, isn't it? On tabletop, the normal reaction is contributed by this much part of the chain. So what is the normal reaction? Normal reaction is nothing but m into g. This much part has providing certain weight that is balancing the normal reaction. So what is the weight of the topmost part? The weight of the topmost part is the weight of the topmost part. That itself is the normal reaction, and that is x into lambda into g. Okay, so you can cancel these terms, lambda also cancelling. So ultimately you are getting y by x is mu. This relation you have to remember. How? If this kind of a question, if they are asking, you must know the hanging part, the length of the chain which is hanging, to the length which is rest on the table. This ratio is all the time equal to the coefficient of friction. So according to question, the coefficient of friction they have given as 0.25, that is nothing but 1 by 4. So what is the idea? One part is lying on table, one part is lying on table and 4 parts are hanging here. And the question demands what is the percentage length. So what is the maximum fraction of the length of the chain that is hanging over the edge of table? 4 part is hanging here, 1 part is lying on the table, totally 5 parts. Out of 5 parts, 4 part is hanging. Yes or no? So what is the fraction which is hanging? 4 by 5. Out of 5, 4 is hanging. Okay? Sorry. You can see from this thing, the x is 4. Okay, x is 4 and y is 1. So totally 5. So out of 5, 1 part is hanging. So what is this percentage? 1 by 5 is nothing but 20%. Is it clear? So the correct option for question number 15 is option 1. Question number 16. A magnetic needle lying parallel to a magnetic field requires W units of work to turn it through 60 degrees. So this question says a magnetic needle is initially parallel with the magnetic field. So the magnetic moment vector is parallel with the magnetic field. So what is the initial angle? The initial angle is 0 degree. You are turning this magnetic needle by an angle 60 degrees. So the final angle is 60 degrees. For this much turning, the work requirement, the work done by the external agent is W. How you can calculate the work done if these angles are given? All the time, do remember this equation. Work done to turn the magnetic needle from initial angle to final angle will be m into b into cos of initial angle minus cos of final angle of rotation. If you are applying this equation, what will happen? The work done will be m into b into, what is cos of initial angle is 0 degree, that is cos 0 minus cos 60. Cos 0 is 1 and this is 1 by 2. 1 minus 1 by 2, answer is 1 by 2, so mb by 2. The work done is mb by 2, equation number 1. But the question demands, what is the value of the torque required to maintain the needle at the final position? Finally, the magnetic needle is making an angle. When you are turning this magnetic needle by an angle of 60 degree, the magnetic needle is making an angle 60 degree with the field. So at this position, what is the torque acting on the magnetic needle? What is the torque acting on the magnetic needle? The equation for torque will be m cross b. That is nothing but mb sine theta. M into b into sine 60. Sine 60, you know, it is root 3 by 2. You have to write the answer in terms of work done. And here the work done is given as mb by 2. Instead of mb by 2, substitute the work done as w. So answer is root 3 times of w. So the torque required at the final position to hold the needle is root 3 w. And the correct option is option A is the correct answer. Question number 17. A particle is executing SHM between 2 points P and Q with 0 velocity at these points, which are the distance A and B from a fixed point O. So in question number 17, they say there are 2 points P and Q, and in between these 2 points, the particle is executing SHM. The velocity of the particle at these 2 points are 0. That implies these 2 points are the extreme points. One more data they given. These points are at the distance A and B from a fixed point O. Suppose there is a fixed point O here. From this O, These points are at a distance of A as well as B respectively. Clear? Then they are asking the velocity of the particle midway between the points P and Q is V. So in between point, midway of P and Q, the velocity is V for the particle. They are asking then the time period of oscillation of the particle. So the demand of the question is find out the time period of oscillation. How we can find out the time period of oscillation? See here, this is the velocity at the midpoint. For the oscillation, SHM is happening between P and Q in such a way that P and Q are the extreme points. The midpoint is the mean position. What is the importance of mean position? The velocity at the mean position will be the maximum velocity, isn't it? So what is the value of maximum velocity? Maximum velocity is given as V, and for any kind of simple harmonic motion, the equation for maximum velocity is A omega, amplitude into omega, which is equal to V. Now, how we can find out the amplitude? That's why they given the terms A and B. The total length till Q is B and till P is A from the origin O. So this distance that is between P and Q is nothing but B minus A. B minus A. Amplitude is measuring actually from mean position. Mean position to extreme position, the distance is amplitude. So this is also amplitude. So 2 times of amplitude is B minus A, isn't it? 2 times of amplitude is B minus A. So amplitude will be B minus A by 2. Substitute this data here, you are getting B minus A divided by 2 into, they are asking time period. How you can write omega in terms of t? Omega is equal to 2 pi by t. This equation is very familiar for you people. So omega can be written as 2 pi by t, which is equal to V. So if you are cancelling these two together, then finally what is the expression for time period? Time period is coming as pi into B minus A divided by V. So this is the required answer. Correct option for this question is option B. Question number 18. A boat crossing a river moves with velocity v relative to still water. The river is flowing with a velocity of v by 2 with respect to the bank. The angle with respect to the flow direction with which the boat should move to minimize the drift. So in this question, they are asking what is the angle the boat has to make to minimize the drift. Suppose this is the river. Okay, so the river is moving with velocity v by 2 and this is the vertical direction. The boat is moving by making a certain angle from this vertical, and the relative velocity of the boat with respect to water is given as v. Try to understand when the boat is steering at a particular angle to minimize the drift. Drift is happening because of the velocity of river. Can we cancel the velocity of river using a component of this boat? Is it possible? Yes, in this question, definitely it is possible. Why? One of the component of V can be V by 2. Because of that, these two things cancel each other. For getting a component here as V by 2, what should be this angle? So this angle, let I am saying this angle is alpha. The V cos alpha has to be V by 2. Yes or no? So the cos value should be 60 degree. Because of that, the boat will, this will be the final velocity. Final velocity of the boat will move in straight without any drift and exactly reaching at this point. So this is a condition of zero drift. So if this angle is 60 degree, this total angle is 90, this angle will be 30 degree. The boat has to make an angle of 30 degree with the vertical direction. But read the question carefully. They are asking what is the angle made by the boat with respect to the river bank or direction of the river. So the total angle here is 90 plus 30, 120 degree is the answer. Okay, so here our answer for this question is option D is the correct answer. One more thing. Let me give some clue for this kind of a question. For minimum drift, do remember this shortcut. For the minimum drift, if the boat is moving by making certain angle, this is river velocity and this is velocity of the boat. Okay, so this angle for minimum drift, this angle sine theta will be either VR by V or V by VR. Clear? Either VR by V or V by VR. When the value is coming as VR by V, this is the condition for zero drift. And this is the condition for what? Some other minimum drift. You have to select out of these two one possible value. Here, the river velocity is V by 2. You can substitute the V by 2 here. And the boat velocity is V. So V by 2 by V is 1 by 2. So what will be theta? Theta will be sine 30 is 1 by 2. So this theta will be 30 degree you are getting. But if you are substituting the value here, you are getting V by 2 answer is 2. The sine theta value cannot be 2. Is it clear? The maximum value of sine theta is 1. So you can remember this equation. Either one of this equation will be the answer. So the most suitable one you can select according to that. If the format is coming according to this equation, that is VR by V format, always zero drift will happen. You can use this formula as hand. Question number 20. Three rings each having equal radius r are placed mutually perpendicular to each other and each having its center at the origin of coordinate system. If current I is flowing through each ring, then the magnitude of the magnetic field at the common center. So in this question, the question is from the chapter Magnetic Effect of Current. You must know a result. If there is a current carrying coil, the current is I, what will be the magnetic field at the center? The magnetic field, the magnitude of magnetic field at the center will be mu naught I divided by 2 times of radius. R is radius of the coil, and the direction of this magnetic field you can get using right hand thumb rule. It will be in the axial direction like this. Clear? Here there are 3 coils. One coil is in this direction, other coil is in this horizontal plane, and one coil is in the plane of board itself. So this portion is the origin. They are asking what is the total magnetic field. How we can calculate the total magnetic field? See here, if any kind of a current, identical current I is flowing here, what will happen? The magnetic field, because of I current using right hand thumb rule, it is upwards. Let its value is B. Because of the current in this coil, the magnetic field is again B and in X direction. Because of the current in this field, this coil, the coil which is in the plane of board, the magnetic field is outward. Actually, it is perpendicular to you. Okay, you can show it as a direction dot. Clear, the magnetic field is towards you. So these are the 3 identical magnetic fields on these 3 identical coil because of the same value of current. So these 3 magnetic fields B, B and B are mutually perpendicular. If these 3 mutually perpendicular vectors are added, what is the resultant magnetic field? A resultant magnetic field will be the vector summation of these 3 things. So the resultant magnetic field will be B I cap plus B j cap plus B k cap, and the magnitude of this resultant will be root of B square plus B square plus B square, which is nothing but root 3 times of B. And one of the B value using the current on the coil and the dimension of the coil, you can mention it as root 3 mu naught I by 2r. Clear? So correct answer for this question is option A.
എൻ്റെ പേര് ആർച്ച. ഞാൻ എയിംസ് ഡൽഹിയിൽ ഫൈനൽ ഇയർ സ്റ്റുഡൻ്റ് ആണ്. എയിംസിൽ എയിംസ് എൻ്റെ റാങ്ക് 91 ആയിരുന്നു. OBC റാങ്ക് 7 ആയിരുന്നു. ജിപ്മർ 28 ആയിരുന്നു. OBC 4th ആയിരുന്നു. കീമിലും നല്ല റാങ്ക് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. KVPY 168 ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു റാങ്ക്. റിറ്റ്സിൽ ഞാൻ 3 വർഷം പഠിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. 10th ഫൗണ്ടേഷൻ അറ്റൻഡ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു.